morning, my old friend, let's open up the curtain to the show. Don't you know the weather glass looks good, but guess we'll wait until the daylight proves it so. Oh, you know, either way I'll go and light the stove, slacken up the frost from last night's cold. This pane of glass and I, we watched for hours, recorded scenes of our lifetime. We stared down winter storms and summer showers, and prayed till everyone was fine. We framed it all, you know, this pane of glass and I.
Well, Travis, that song really tugs at my heartstrings because it speaks to me of times gone by. We didn't have any modern conveniences, certainly not central heating in Jackson's Cove in the 50s and 60s. The houses were very cold in the morning. In fact, the canvas would shrink on the floor and straighten out when the heat went around. Dad would be the first one up when he was home. He would go to the kitchen and scrape a spot on the window, and depending on the weather would say, "It's a good day to haul wood with the horse," or "It's not fit for a dog outside today, so I'll stay home." Then he would light the fire in the wood stove and put the kettle on to boil. Mom would be up by this time. Her perspective on the weather was different. When she looked out through the peephole in the window, she wondered if it would be a good day on clothes. She would then call the four of us. We would dress behind the stove, wash our face and hands, have breakfast, and then be on our way to school, with more watching through the window, Mom watching through the window to make sure we were safe with the snow pod so high, and that we didn't stray from the path on the way to school. Every season as Mom did her chores, she looked out of the window to see whatever was going on and comment on it to whoever was home. This was her viewpoint from her little piece of the world. As we grew up and left home, it was common on our visits to see Dad leaning on the fence post, watching for us to come home, and Mom would be in the window looking out. When we left, there was a repeat performance of this, but she would be waving to us as well. It's been many years since they passed on, but I have to confess, I still look back at the window. When I go down, I can picture them there smiling and happy to see us. What a beautiful memory that is.
Now, not the only one, this once was the first window that we owned. Don't you know? We put it where it is so we could watch all of the family come and go. Oh, you know, see them make their way to school each day. Watch them on the beaches as they play. This pane of glass and I, we watched for hours, recorded scenes of our lifetime. We stared down winter storms and summer showers, and prayed till everyone was fine. We framed it all, you know, this pane of glass and I. Some of my favorite pictures as the season's colors paint the cold. Don't you know? You see it in the faces as the winter's grip. It finally let them go. Oh, you know, time the kettle as they came up the road. Wished taillights, they were headlights coming home. This pane of glass and I, we watched for hours, recorded scenes of our lifetime. We stared down winter storms and summer showers, prayed till everyone was fine. We framed it all, you know, this pane of glass and I. We framed it all, you know, this pane of glass and I.
My name's Dave Hayashida, and I'm the founder of the Regional Whale Pavilion down here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, it started way back in the late 90s. There was a whale that washed up just down in the next town of Rattling Brook, and we had heard that it was, quote, a usual whale, and so I went down to see it, and to me, it didn't look like a humpback whale, which is what they said it was, and so I thought it was a rare whale. So I contacted Dr. John Leon from Memorial University, and I hadn't known him at the time, but I contacted him on the phone and asked if he might be interested to come down and see it because it looked like it might be a rare whale. So he eventually did come down and decided that it was going to be of interest to him, and he assembled a team. It was really an international team, so we had people from the United States, there were people from Brazil, people from the Veterinary College in Prince Edward Island, so people from all over. And so he came down and took apart that whale that was in Rattling Brook. And then a year after that, another small white-beaked dolphin washed up, again in Rattling Brook. And I thought it'd be interesting to try to put that back together. And so over the course of a year, he and I corresponded, and we put that back together, and that's in the Pottery parking lot. And after I finished that small 9-foot whale, he said to me, you know, David, now that you've done this whale, you could do any size whale. And really, I mean, there's no comparison between this whale at 50 feet long and a small dolphin, but that was kind of John's superpower. And so he convinced me that it was possible, and so I contacted the people in the region and said, John says it's possible, and so they agreed that maybe it was, and it sort of rolled out from there, and now we have the 2 pavilions, one here in Kings Point and one in Triton.
Okay, so how important is it for Kings Point to have the whale pavilion established here and hold the world's largest reconstruction of the humpback whale?
Yeah, it's interesting you say the world's largest reconstruction, because I always feel a little bit funny saying that, although I do think it's absolutely true, because we were in contact with the folks who claim to have the world's second largest one, which is in Alaska, and theirs is 45 feet long. So, and ours is 50 feet long. So I'm thinking, based on what they're saying and the research that we've done, that we indeed do have the world's largest reconstruction of a humpback. And we're really fortunate here in Kings Point to have the whale right in town. It is a regional project, so a number of various locations were picked throughout the entire Emerald Zone. And quite frankly, originally we had discussed about having it in Rattling Brook, but as it turned out, we couldn't get enough volunteers, and so in the end, it was easier to sort of get the ball rolling here in Kings Point, where I was able to convince a large group of people to sort of jump on the project. I think some of the comments I got, well, this is a crazy idea, but if you want help, we'll help. So this is the great thing about the various communities. You ask for help and you get it. So, and in terms of being fortunate, I mean, we've got, of course, the Alexander Murray Trail here, and then, the great cafe and all the other things that we have in town. And really, to add that into the mix, it's really been able to bring us to the threshold where bus tours are interested in coming to the area, because they can drop in for lunch, they can drop into the pottery shop, and they can drop in to see the whale. So it's enough of a core mass that it brings them off the highway and into the town.
Love is a powerful emotion and connection within human relationships. When a loved one dies, the connection is broken, and the people left behind are filled with grief. Traditionally, they would visit a cemetery to mourn and try to find some comfort in their grief. But what if someone's loved one doesn't have a traditional place of burial? What if those grieving do not find comfort and solace in a cemetery? What if there was an alternative place to find that comfort?
The phone in the wind, sometimes known as a wind phone, originated in Japan. A man had lost his cousin to cancer, and he wanted to find a way to connect with his memories of him. Anyone who has lost someone could understand that desire for connection. He built a phone booth with an unconnected phone. Typically, when you see a phone in the wind, it's usually a rotary phone and placed in a quiet, secluded area. The phone in the wind is a safe place to allow anyone a chance to grieve and connect and remember their loved ones.
We know that grief is universal, so why choose Kings Point as the place for a phone in the wind?
In the last few years, our family, like many other families in our community, have suffered the loss of a loved one. That has brought much grief to our community. In the midst of the sorrow and the loss, our family decided we would like to do something to give to all of those who are grieving and to give back to the community and the area that supported us during our time of loss. Our phone in the wind is located in the RB Walking Park Trail. It's surrounded by trees and a brook, and we hope that it can be a place of serene peacefulness and comfort. Anyone, tourists and locals, can use this. Maybe they can pause there in the quiet to remember and reflect on the memories of their loved ones. encourage young and old, anyone who's experienced grief, to use the phone in the win. Our goal is that it brings comfort, but also a reminder to talk about our grief, because grief affects us all. May the phone in the win be one of the many ways to help all of us cope with our loss. You are not alone. We are all connected.
Phyllis, it's a real pleasure to sit with you and chat about your involvement in volunteering throughout our community of Kings Point and beyond. Mm-hmm. And I guess we could start with just a question of if you could tell us a little bit about your volunteering experiences right from the beginning, and how you might have gotten started with that.
Well, I started volunteering at the age of 14. It was our first come home year, 1966. And I must say that was an eye-opener for me. When I think back at those times, I think about Aunt Sadie Burt. She would let us come into her kitchen and make homemade hamburger patties. And we made probably hundreds that day. And back then, the come home year was held on the field between Junior Burt and Aunt Sadie Burt's house. So actually that was my first experience with volunteering. Then I was involved with the come home year committee back in 97. We did that one. And we just did the one in 2022. So I don't think I'm going to be around for the next one. I'm getting too old for that now. But it's been enjoyable. I had 18 years with Girl Guides. I started off as a brownie leader, not old enough to be a leader. So Audrey Burt had to help us out. She was the adult figure there at that time. But I started off again at 14 as a brownie leader. I went up through the system. When Sparks came on stream, I did Sparks, brownies, Girl Guides. I wasn't a Pathfinder leader, but I always took Pathfinders to camp. I was district commissioner, division commissioner, on the provincial council for Girl Guides. I started the first senior branch Girl Guide movement in Newfoundland. That was really enjoyable. But back then, my mother-in-law passed away, and I decided that I was going to take my father-in-law in to live with us. So things changed. But those 18 years, I think the most enjoyable times were the summer camps with Girl Guides and the tenting. It was quite an experience. And you know, even today, it was only last year, this young lady came into the cafe when I was there. She had her little girl with her. And she said, you know, I want you to meet this lady. She said, she was the first one that taught us how to make a purple stew. Now, we're not actually making a stew, but it's a little song. Yes. And so I got to meet her little girl, and she said, that's the lady that I want you to meet right there. So those years were very enjoyable, yes.
I have lots of fond memories, Phyllis.
Lots good memories.
Of Girl Guiding in Kings Point,
yeah.
and you right at the center.
I loved it. I loved it. Best years of my life, actually. Yeah.
Phyllis, why do you think people volunteer, and perhaps why did you volunteer?
I think every person has a commitment. We should be doing something for somebody else. I truly believe that. And not for money, but if we can do something to make this world a better place, I think it's our duty to do it. And I would recommend that a lot of people get involved with volunteering, because you know it's something that's going out by the wayside. You know that, right? It's hard to get volunteers these days and get people committed. Mm-hmm. But I think everybody should get involved as a volunteer.
It's a nice lead into my next question for you. What is it that over the years, and you know, with life happens, and there are many other commitments that take you away from things that you're involved in. What is it that's helped keep you motivated to continue with volunteering, even up to this summer? We know that they're still involved.
Yeah, again, going back to what I just said, I think we have an obligation. Right now, I'm starting to wind down, of course. I'm getting older. But I'm still chair of our library board, and I've been on that board now almost 30 years. And no matter what's going on in the community, I try to help. I mean, I'm not on the trail committee anymore. I'm not on the fire brigade as a fireette or anything like that, but I still want to help, and I get a satisfaction from that. And I'm probably foolish,er than anybody else in Kings Point, because when we had our last tea party, I brought all those dishes home dirty, and there's still teapots in my dishwasher that has got to be washed from 2 weeks ago. So, you know, it is a lot of work. I have to say, volunteering is a lot of work, but I do get satisfaction from that. I love it.
Thank you so much, Phyllis.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This is the Caribou Monument here at Bowring Park in St. John's. It's facing east towards Europe, where Newfoundlanders so bravely served during the First World War, a conflict in which 22 men from Kings Point and Rattling Brook served. The memorial wall here at Bowring Park is a replica of Beaumont Hamel Newfoundland Memorial Park in France. It honors all Newfoundlanders who served during the First World War and those lost with no known grave. Listed on this wall are three of our own, Thomas Rideout and Edward Starks of Kings Point, along with William Arthur White of Rattling Brook. This film briefly profiles our soldiers who died overseas in World War I.
William was the son of John and Mary Ann White. In June of 1915, at the age of 20, he enlisted with the Newfoundland Regiment. Later that fall, he was sent overseas to Scotland, where he would spend several months training to become a soldier. In April of 1916, he was sent into France in preparation for the upcoming Battle of the Somme.
I'm here at the United Church Cemetery in Rattling Brook, and we're visiting the grave of William Arthur White. William was one of 9 men to serve from Rattling Brook in either the Newfoundland Regiment or the Newfoundland Forestry Corps during the First World War.
This stone monument is etched with the caribou symbol of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, and William was one of over 700 to have either been killed, wounded, or missing at Beaumont Hamel on July 1st, 1916. He was the first of 4 young men from Kings Point and Rattling Brook to die overseas during the First World War. With no known grave, William is now immortalized at the Beaumont Hamel Memorial Park in France. Thomas Rideout was 19 when he signed up in April of 1916. The son of Isaac and Eliza Rideout and the nephew of Giles Rideout, he was recorded as working as a plumber in Grand Falls at the time of his enlistment. He traveled overseas in the summer of 1916.
I'm here at the United Church Cemetery in Kings Point at the headstone of Private Thomas Rideout. Thomas is another one of our fallen soldiers who died in April of 1917 at the Battle of Monchy-le-Preux.
Thomas has no known resting place and is memorialized on the Beaumont Hamel Memorial in France. He is also listed on the Grand Falls Windsor Cenotaph. "19-year-old Edward Starks, the son of Hezekiah and Emma, left Kings Point in April of 1916. He would travel overseas later that year and was only a short line in the trenches when he suffered a cut on his finger from a bully beef tin. This injury was quite severe, and Edward spent months in England resting and recuperating. In June of 1917, he rejoined the regiment in France. A few months later, in October 1917, Edward was killed in fighting at Brombeek in Belgium. A telegram was sent home to Newfoundland with the news of Edward's death. According to his family, Edward's mother took to her bed and never arose again. She died a week after the telegram had arrived, from a broken heart. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the memorial at Beaumont Hamel. As the war progressed, more men enlisted, including Augustus Chesley Toms, the son of Esau and Mary Ann. He enlisted in July of 1916 at the age of 23 years. Later that year, he was sent to Scotland for training, and from there, he was sent to France in early 1917 while serving as a stretcher bearer during frontline action. He received a gunshot wound, which proved to be fatal. I spoke to his great-niece Betty House, who shared some of her family history and spoke of Augustus's legacy.
And what can you tell me about Augustus from his war service?
Well, all I know as a kid growing up from my parents said he was in, or he had a call, he was enlisted to go to war at a very young age. And he got killed there and came back No, he's buried over in the fields.
You know a little bit about how he died, I guess, or just from hearsay, I suppose, or
Just
what
from
they told you.
hearsay, my great-grandfather received a message that he was shot. But that's all.
Yeah.
Only what I was told as a kid. Well, Uncle Gus died in winter of 1917. And my father was born in October of the same year.
The remains of Private Augustus Chesley Toms lie in Grovetown British Cemetery, Mayo, France. These men and the others that served during the First World War from Kings Point and Bolingbroke left a major imprint on our local history. May we always remember them and never forget their sacrifice. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Jim Card. I'm from Kings Point, Newfoundland, and I've been sketching and drawing for about 61 years.
Jim, what's the oldest piece of artwork that you've kept, and how old do you think you were when you created it?
I think this is it, and I was about 6 maybe or 7 years old. And here are some of the illustrations.
And I see they're colored in and everything.
I think that came later when my kids grew up, a little bit, they were growing up.
So, how did you start drawing and painting? Was there an inspiration, or was it just kind of a natural thing?
I think it was a natural bent, and it just came naturally to me to do it. I used to read a lot of comic books, the old Wild West days, and I think that inspired me in the beginning. And I even made some comics myself after. I should have said I became a comic after. Oh, made you laugh.
So, Jim, there is something that makes you a bit unique as an artist. And even though you sell your work, you don't draw or paint to sell your work, or even to be recognized. From what I've gathered, you create artwork with someone else in mind. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, yeah, in recent years, I've been painting things I feel led to paint and giving them to people I feel would be blessed by getting them. So lots of friends and people I know. A couple of years ago, I did a painting of the Cove, Jackson's Cove, with the United Church in the background, and I knew it was a very important object to a friend of mine, Travis Richards, and so I decided to paint it, a picture of it, and present it to Travis and Tammy.
Phyllis, too. You painted Phyllis's son's houses, didn't you?
For Phyllis Burt, I painted a picture of Stephen, that's Phyllis's son's house, and gave it to them. And then, of course, I had to do another one because he had another brother living next door and couldn't be unfair. So I had to do Brad's as well.
Right, of course. And Phyllis has those in her house now, doesn't she?
She does, and hopefully they'll be passed on to the owners of the house eventually.
You have a lot of pieces here, Jim, because you've kept pretty much everything that you've created for these last 71 years. So,
for better or worse.
Would you be able to show me some of your favorite pieces?
Okay. This is a painting that I did in 1977 from a photo that was taken, a black and white photo taken in 1965. And it shows 2 stores that used to belong to the Toms family of Kings Point. And my mom came to work in that little yellow building when I was just 5 or 6, and I was too short to see over the counter. And then later years she worked in the other building, and for 2 different employers that someone else took over later on. This is a painting, a 3 by 6 foot painting of a town in northern Italy called San Daniele del Friuli, and it was painted for a foreman of a project I was working on in Sudbury, Ontario. And I had a week off work, no employment, and I painted this one for a fee. And the owner was very pleased. He looked at it and he said, "San Daniele, my hometown," and he was almost crying. It was done from basically all I had to go by was a picture on the cover on the top of a tin can with cured meat in it.
And you created that from a can of tin meat?
Basically. I didn't get to eat the meat either, it was empty.
Show me one more of your favorites.
One more. Oh, that's hard. Well, in the summer of 21, I believe it was, or 20, I'm not sure which, I went down for my first visit to Ming's Bight down in White Bay. And I was so impressed with the beauty of the place and the friendliness of the people. And they were offering to come home here the next year, so I said I'd like to paint a painting of it and presented them, they could auction it off or whatever to raise funds. But come over here didn't happen, so the next spring I went down and presented to the town and asked them if they'd keep it in their town office where the public could see it anytime they came in.
And it's still there to this day, as far as you know.
I would think so, unless someone kidnapped it.
Thank you, Jim. This has been fantastic. It's really been nice to hear about the reason why you paint.
Thank you.
So Randy, tell us a little bit about what Rattling Brook means to you and your family.
Well, it's funny you ask that, because just very recently, this summer in fact, that I've realized that I've never really truly left Rattling Brook.
That you never really leave home. You never get away from that thing in your hometown that it has over you. You don't outgrow where you came from. For years I had felt that I had outgrown my little hometown of Rattling Brook. Not that I was necessarily trying to outgrow it, I just felt a discernible dip in what my hometown meant to me as my life meandered along, finding me in one town after another and then another. But of late I've come to realize that you can't really break free from that place called home. My father, Dexter Edison, was born and raised in Rattling Brook, as was I. Father passed away in the summer of 2023 at 85, and his childhood recollections in his waning months touched off a reimagining of what Rattling Brook was, or is, to me. Father spoke in almost a romanticized fashion about his childhood days, his learning to shoot bullbirds with a muzzle loader that his grandfather, Jesse Newick, lashed to the gunnels of a small boat to prevent him from being toppled overboard. He told stories of rowing to Corner Brook with Jesse to haul trout nets, and climbing the aerial with 84-year-old Jesse to pick berries and lugging them back down the mountain in well-stained flour sacks. He spoke of Annie's Brook, which flowed through our garden, its waters providing a source of power in the days before Rattling Brook was introduced to the grid. Thanks to those yarns from the past, I was made aware that a pond near a local landmark called the U, atop Rattling Brook Ridge, was named in her honor. In fact, the local landmark known as Turncoat Hill also had a connection to Annie, as she had converted to Catholicism during her days in Rattling Brook, meeting to discuss her newfound faith at a site named for a person who had forsaken their religious belief for another. All his reminiscing reminded me of what Rattling Brook meant to me as a boy. For me, it was joining Grandmother Edison in a trip to the apple garden, returning with her apron full of apples to make pies and jam. It was sitting on the woodbox at Grandfather's house listening to the stories and watching him fill snowshoes. It was summer days at Rattling Brook Falls, swimming and exploring caves, making memories to last a lifetime. It was exploring the hills in this little piece of the Alps in Newfoundland, gathering the biggest maple leaf we could find and compressing them between the pages of a textbook. It was attending a schoolhouse built over the ocean, complete with an outhouse, and fishing for tomcods through the window as part of our science studies, and loading the old pump organ on a Comatic to bring it to the LOL Lodge for the event of the year, the Christmas concert. It was sitting around the stove at Joshua Thompson Sons General Store listening to the playful banter between the men who would visit, and old Freddie Frecker, the man of mystery who owned all those tiny shacks at the end. Our family lineage runs deep in Rattling Brook, back to the very beginnings, in fact. Jesse Newick was the first settler, having departed his family home in Jackson's Cove to find a new life further up the bank. That same plot of land that he had made a home on and raised two separate families will soon be for sale, effectively extinguishing the presence this forefather had established. As father was getting his affairs in order in his last years, he was reluctant to sell the final piece of that land. They had sold our old family home years ago, but would quickly change the subject whenever I broached the idea of selling the remainder of the land. And now I understand why. My father had left Rattling Brook more than 20 years ago in the physical sense, but to his dying days he was not willing to cut loose this final tie to home. While the purchase and sale agreement will eventually bring a legal end to the Jesse Newick connection to this beautiful little town, we now know that we can never really leave. As Oliver Wendell Holmes said, where we love is home, home that our feet may leave, but not our hearts.
Bread pudding. Every Newfoundlander knows the delicious taste of soggy bread and onions alongside a feed of jigs dinner on a dreary old Sunday, whether they wants to or not. Nan, you knows I don't like bread pudding. Can I have another piece of pastry instead?
Yes, now, I dear allow. Nan was up all morning making that. You'll eat your bread pudding and like it. There's youngsters starving over in CBS, sure?
Like a lot of things we think about being inherent to Newfoundland, bread pudding arrived here with the English settlers. That's right, they didn't just kill and destroy the land, they also brought bread pudding. You see, in 11th century England, food was scarce to a lot of people, so seeing as all you needed was stale bread, water, sugar, and maybe some spices, bread pudding soon gained popularity. And unbeknownst to the English peasants making it, would soon become a treat that would be enjoyed by many a hungover Newfoundlander. Nan, are you making jigs?
Yes, my son, and you would know that if you wasn't up all night drinking Molson Lights with John Mackey and the boys from the Cove. Now get downstairs and put some wood in the stove. You knows Pop got a bad back.
But Nan, the Leafs game was on.
That's right, Ralph, you tell him.
By the 13th century, with a lot of people's luck on the up and up, came the addition of eggs and milk, and bread pudding became known as bread and butter pudding, making it more than just food for peasants. By the 18th century, people were making bread and butter pudding with puff pastry, orange blossom water, raisins, currants, and thick and spiced cream. Some fancy, eh? I know, they must be townies. But here, at home, we like to stick to the basics. Every Sunday, you can find people gathered around the table, eating stale bread, onions, and spices, boiled in a bag, and loving every minute of it. Because here, it's about family.
Hey, what's your fellas doing behind the shed? You better back the shit.
Jesus, man, bro. Okay.